Jimmy Kimmel is back. Well, kinda, maybe. I'll explain how it all went down and whether or not he'll actually be seen on a TV near you. Plus, President Trump pleads with pregnant mothers to avoid taking Tylenol, citing studies linking the drug to autism in young children. And the sickening story of a Tennessee foster father busted after explicit child pornography was found on his cell phone. Those stories and more today, Tuesday, September 23rd. I'm Caitlin Becker, and this is the New York Postcast. President Trump is telling expectant mothers to avoid taking Tylenol during their pregnancy over fears that it can cause autism in children. He added that the FDA would be updating the label on acetaminophen to reflect the risk he claims.
Don't take Tylenol. There's no downside. Don't take it. You'll be uncomfortable. It won't be as easy, maybe, but don't take it. If you're pregnant, don't take Tylenol. And don't give it to the baby after the baby is born.
The president, who was joined by HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., is citing data the administration says shows, quote, consistent associations between acetaminophen in pregnancy and autism. Now, acetaminophen is, of course, the name of the active drug in Tylenol. The president also called for an adjustment to the vaccination schedule of American children. He suggested separating measles, mumps, and rubella, commonly referred to as the MMR vaccine, into 3 separate shots. And Trump repeatedly stressed that these were his opinions and not necessarily those of medical professionals. And still, when pressed on whether or not he was now anti-vax, he sang the praises of vaccines in general. Earlier this week, the president said, quote, we found an answer to autism. And while he stopped short of such a bold assertion again, the administration also announced an FDA filing to change the label on a treatment called leucovorin. That's a vitamin used in cancer and anemia treatments that some doctors think may be effective for autism. Kimmel is back. After a messy few days, Jimmy Kimmel Live will return tonight. In a statement, ABC's parent company Disney said, quote, we made the decision to suspend production on the show to avoid further inflaming a tense situation. We've spent the last days having thoughtful conversations with Jimmy, and after those conversations, we reached the decision to return the show on Tuesday. Sources tell the Post that Kimmel will address the suspension in his monologue tonight, but that he'll stop short of apologizing for the false claim that Charlie Kirk's alleged assassin was part of what he called, quote, the MAGA gang. Kimmel negotiated his return directly with Disney CEO Bob Iger and entertainment co-chair Dana Walden. Now, Disney reinstating Kimmel doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be able to watch the show wherever you're at. As of Monday night, it wasn't clear whether every ABC station would air it. You'll remember that big station groups, Sinclair and Nexstar, had threatened to preempt Kimmel before Disney had even sidelined him last week. And together, they own the lion's share of the stations where Kimmel airs. A spokesperson for Turning Point USA, that's the conservative group Charlie Kirk co-founded, said of Kimmel's return, quote, Disney and ABC caving and allowing Kimmel back on the air is not surprising, but it's their mistake to make. Nexstar and Sinclair do not have to make the same choice. A Tennessee dad did not get the welcome home he expected when he returned from a cruise with his kids and pregnant wife. Instead, he got arrested. Jason Allen Miller has fostered at least 20 children over the years. That's a fact that will become an important part of this story. Now, Miller was picked for a random screening at Port Miami this month after arriving from a vacation in the Cayman Islands. Now, during the search, for whatever reason, he willingly gave immigration agents the password to his cell phone, which is where authorities say they found several photos of suspected child sexual abuse hidden in his Google Photos app. Miller and his wife were traveling with 8 kids, ages 5 to 12, 7 of whom were children they fostered and then adopted. Now, Miller admitted to knowing there was child porn on his phone and claimed no one else had access to it. He was charged with possession and transportation of child pornography and could face up to 30 years behind bars if convicted. President Trump is in New York today to address the UN General Assembly. And if you are also in New York today, it is why traffic is so hellacious in Midtown. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt told reporters the president would be, quote, touting the renewal of American strength around the world. Trump will also be having smaller sidebars with leaders from Ukraine, the European Union, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and the UAE, among many others. The high-profile gathering comes as Israel pushes deeper into Gaza And as I mentioned yesterday, several countries moved to recognize a Palestinian state. Then there's the threat of Russia expanding their war in Ukraine as they repeatedly intrude into NATO airspace. So what are the president's priorities this week, and what can we expect to hear from him later today? To help us dig into all of that, I'm joined by the Post's Washington reporter, Caitlin Dornbos. Caitlin, for starters, what are we expecting from the president's speech today?
We will see the president give one of his typical, rousing speeches to speak about a number of issues. I'm expecting him to talk about the UN recognition of Palestine as a state. He's been very against that. He's called that a gift to Hamas, particularly being against such a declaration before we get all of the Israeli hostages home. There are also some themes that I'll be listening for. That is this idea of globalism versus isolationism. You've heard those buzzwords being thrown out, but what do they really mean? And then, as well as, any movement in the Ukraine war will clearly be a hot topic. The president is supposed to meet today with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, and we will see if any progress can be made in that turn, because as our U.S. envoys have said, this really isn't a Ukraine problem at this point. This is a Russia problem.
And Caitlin, that really brings me to my next question here, because President Trump often talks about how he's ended several wars and conflicts in his short time in office, but two of the biggest ones still loom. And you just mentioned them, the wars in Ukraine and Gaza. So you touched on Ukraine there, but can we expect anything on those fronts between Ukraine and Russia or Israel and Gaza this week?
I think standing by Israel is going to be a really key point of his, even if he speaks directly to it or not. And that's really because the entirety of the United Nations are pressuring in, trying to get Israel to settle its war, which it's really unclear right now if that's even possible, because Hamas is not willing to play ball in getting those hostages back to Israel. Whether it comes to what's going to happen with Ukraine, I think that's going to be interesting to keep our eyes on. There have been a lot of European partners who have been standing up to Russia in various meetings and briefings this week. And I think we can see that I'll keep close eyes on whether or not they actually do anything about the incursions into NATO airspace. So watch how President Trump speaks about the Polish airspace being invaded by the Russians with those recent drones. And then also,
because to remind people, of course, that's a NATO ally. That is a NATO country. So that does change the game quite a bit.
It does. And then it kind of anteed up. We've got the new UN ambassador for the U.S., Mike Waltz. You'll remember his name as the former national security advisor. So he came out in his first statement today, really calling out Russia for entering Polish airspace. And then again, with Estonian airspace, also a NATO ally, 3 fighter jets were flown into their airspace. These are things that could lead into escalations such as World War III. So it's really interesting to watch the Trump administration figure out how they're going to handle these incursions. And then we're starting to see the new leadership of what we can expect from the new UN ambassador.
And President Trump has been nominated multiple times for the Nobel Peace Prize. It definitely seems like a priority for him right now. So how does that all work? Is that something he can lobby for himself with other leaders? Should we be keeping an eye on something like that this week?
I think that all of the world and the world leaders understands that President Trump really does want that. I don't think that he's going to be shaking hands saying, hey, nominate me for, but you never know with this president. He's got a great sense of humor. I think that he does stand a good chance at it. I think experts say that he does as well, but it is going to come down to Ukraine and Israel. And unfortunately, I cover this every day and I don't see an end in sight. So.
Our Caitlin Dornbos, we will be keeping an eye on it. And I know you will be on top of all of the movements here in New York with the UN General Assembly meeting. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The bromance is back. After a messy public breakup, Donald Trump and Elon Musk reunited. The pair appeared to have mended fences at Charlie Kirk's memorial on Sunday, the first time they've been seen together since their ugly social media feud. The two were together in a luxury box at State Farm Stadium before Musk and the White House posted photos with the same caption, "For Charlie." A lip reader told the Daily Mail what they believe the two said to one another. The president said, quote, "So Elon, I've heard you wanted to chat. Let's try and work out how to get back on track." Musk apparently nodded before Trump said, "I've missed you." And finally today, let me tell you about Jovan Castrillo, a 30-year-old Florida man who recently became a father and was gifted a miracle, a handwritten letter from his mother, who died when Flight 93 crashed in a Pennsylvania field on 9/11. Jovan was in kindergarten that day, and his teacher had held on to this letter for all these years. Castrillo's mother, Cece Lyles, was a flight attendant on the plane that morning, but a few weeks prior, she'd written a letter thanking his teacher for teaching Jovan how to read. The letter said how proud she was of her son. It's just the kind of thing you'd want to hear from your mom when you're navigating fatherhood. Who is cutting onions in here? I'm not tearing up, but on that emotional note, let's pack it in. I need to go cuddle my cat and I don't know, watch Beaches or something because I need a good cry. And while I have a good cry, you go ahead and like and follow the New York Postcast wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube so we can keep doing this thing together every day. And head over to the New York Post in print or online to see what else is happening in the world today. I'll see you tomorrow.